On behalf of our cyber, I would like to welcome you to this evening's panel, Cross-Cultural and Language Skills, Keys to International Success. We have gathered these distinguished speakers to give their perspectives on this important and timely topic. The mandate of the 31 cybers across the nation, which are, by the way, funded by the Department of Education, is to enhance U.S. competitiveness abroad. Our focus tonight on cross-cultural communication and language skills is an integral part of this effort. In a U.S. News and World Report survey from a few years back, 100 multinational companies, both U.S. and non-U.S. based, gave their opinions about the importance of these skills for their business operations. Some interesting points surfaced from this survey. For example, 85% of the respondents agreed that, quote, a cross-cultural business communication course should be required for all business majors, end quote, and over 50% disagreed with the notion that, quote, only international business majors need to be proficient in a foreign language, end quote. So businesses are, in fact, starting to realize the importance of these skills because it gives their companies a competitive edge to have a workforce with a global mindset and an ability to communicate effectively in the international arena. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I would like to give the floor to ISEC. Are you here, ISEC? An international student organization here on campus which embodies this whole notion of promoting cross-cultural communication and language skills. So please join me in welcoming ISEC.
Hi everybody, my name. Hello again everybody. My name is Uruk and I'm the current local community president of ISEC here in DC. First off, I'd like to thank CIBER for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. ISEC, which is spelled AIESEC, is the world's largest student-based organization. What we do is facilitate international internships for promote cultural cooperation and understanding. And we do that through sending hundreds of individuals on exchange to over 106 different countries and territories, and bringing those individuals to the U.S. to participate in internships that will hopefully create more globally minded and interdependent citizens of this world. And to show you just how diverse our own local community is, we are going to speak to you just a couple of brief sentences and many of the critical languages that we speak. I'm going to say something in Japanese, and then both Josh and Shinali are going to come up and speak to you as well. So, こんばんは。私は名前はジヌです。どうぞよろしく。
안녕하십니까. 제 이름은 이건희입니다. 저는 한국에서 온 국제학생입니다. 현재 저는 아이색 멤버이고 그리고 여기서 국제관계학과 경제학을 공부하고 있습니다. 고맙습니다. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Joshua Lee y yo soy un estudiante internacional de la Corea del Sur. Y yo soy un miembro de ISEC y yo estudio Relaciones Internacionales y la Economía en la Universidad de George Washington. Gracias. Bonjour, je m'appelle Joshua Lee et je suis de la Corée du Sud. Je suis un étudiant international et membre de ISEC, l'organisation. J'étudie les affaires internationales et l'économie ici à l'Université de George Washington. Merci. Dobry wieczór. Меня зовут Joshua. Я студент из Кореи. И я изучаю международные отношения и la экономия в Университете de George Washington. Спасибо. Good evening, my name is Joshua Lee, and I'm an international student from Korea, and I'm a member of ISEC, and I study international affairs and economics at the George Washington University. Thank you.
I really don't know how I could possibly top that. But নমস্কার, আমার নাম সোনালী ব্যানার্জি। আপনাদের সাথে আলাপ হয়ে আমার খুব ভালো লাগছে। Bonsoir, je m'appelle Sonali Banerjee. Je suis une étudiante ici à George Washington University, mais je suis originalement de West Hartford, Connecticut, et mes parents d'Anzan. Good evening, my name is Sonali Banerjee. I'm a student here at the George Washington University, and I'm originally from West Hartford, Connecticut, and my family comes from Calcutta, India.
dags att introducera vår första talare. Vi har här Lobna Ismail som ska prata med oss idag om interdisciplinär och interkulturell kommunikation. Okay, what was the language the last one? You know me too well. Sorry. That was just an impromptu little thing. Okay, so now back to the formalities here. Our keynote speaker this evening is Lobna Ismail, founder and president of Connecting Cultures, a cross-cultural training and consulting business. Her clients include an impressive array of companies and organizations, from Nike and Walt Disney World to school systems and military agencies. I was fortunate enough to hear her speak at the World Trade Center Institute event in Baltimore this spring, and I just said to myself, we need to bring her to GW. So I'm very excited that you're here tonight. So please join me in welcoming Lobna Ismail.
شكرا يا أنا اسمي لبنى إسماعيل وأنا أصلي مصرية لكن مولودة ومتربية هنا في أمريكا. أنا رئيس شركة اسمها Connecting Cultures وأنا مبسوطة قوي إن أبقى معكم اليوم. أي لهجة? Which language is that? Arabic. And it's in big demand, not only here in the United States, but all over the world. But I can tell you, who else speaks Arabic in this room? Okay, you can tell me how broken it is, because I speak Arabic as my second language. I was born and raised in this country. My parents are of Egyptian origin, so those who know Arabic picked up right away that I speak Arabic as a foreigner. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I'm really excited to have a chance to talk to you about why culture matters. Because I can tell you, I actually went to a rivalry campus university, the American University School of International Service. And you will hear much more, but I have to give particular recognition to Sherry Mueller, because she actually was my professor at the School of International Service 20 plus years ago. Shall we keep it at that? And so I'm really grateful that you're here, Sherry, to share with us what you're doing and the book that you have to offer, which is right on mark, about looking at culture and language capabilities today in the world, along with the United States. So let me first find out who is here in this room. How many of you are coming out of the business school? Okay, so most of you are. Okay, then what are the other schools of people that might be here? Okay, and what other? Any others? In the business school, is second language, third language mandatory, required, a part? Okay, so after today, I hope you're going to realize why it's essential and important. I want to talk to you about looking at the field of intercultural communication and why it's important, not just in the world of business, but in the world of diplomacy and the world of how the world interfaces with each other, from nation to nation, person to person. My favorite definition is by a Dutch sociologist, Gert Hofstede, and he says, the mind is the hardware and culture is the software. The mind is the hardware and culture is the software. So just like a PC can't communicate with an Apple without the right software, it's the same with people. It's your capacity and your capability to understand the culture, because it is different. Understanding the software of communicating, of managing, of negotiating, right? Of conveying respect. What does that really mean across cultures is absolutely essential today in the workplace and in the workforce. So having the cultural competency, the cultural capacity, and I just returned from Granada, Spain, where the International Society for Intercultural Communication, Training, and Research had their global congress. And the new term that people are really buzzing about is called cultural intelligence. Is being able to have the cultural intelligence to be able to communicate and to work and to negotiate and to build teams across cultures is absolutely essential. As businesses get more global, not only here in the United States, but around the world, domestic and global diversity is absolutely essential. And I can tell you that the potential for a company and its success or its failure rest upon the cultural capacity or cultural intelligence that one has. I'm going to give you some examples a little later of the corporations that I've been working with or the government agencies, but I can tell you that more and more in just one of the conferences that we just left, Diversity Best Practices, we just had a speaker who talked about the absolute essentialness of being able to have language and cultural understanding in order to not only stay in business, but to grow in business. And that finding out innovation comes with one's cultural capabilities and cultural intelligence, if I can use that term. Because through that awareness and understanding and knowledge gives new insight, new thinking, new practices to qualify yourself, but also your institution or organization to deal with complex social processes among people. Because one of the biggest downfalls has been when we're told, well, American corporations typically, because my specialty is Arab and Muslim and the Middle East, they say, tell us everything we need to know not to get in trouble. You know, give me the do's and don'ts. You know, and they want to hear about don't use your left hand and don't sit with your foot in their face. It's not that simple. No culture follows according to a script. And I was reminded by that when I had a group, and maybe it was through your organization, the National Council of International Visitors, where I also do training on understanding American culture. So I was training a group of Arab men who were going to be going throughout the United States. And I said, let me tell you some things about the nonverbal communication that can be really essential. And research has shown that over 60% of what we communicate is nonverbal. So I went on to share about the touching between members of the same gender. And anyone who knows Arab culture, you're from Lebanon, what's one of the things to know about if men are touching or holding hands in public? Is that?
It's a no-no here.
It's a no-no here.
But they kiss and they hold hands.
They kiss and they hold hands. So I told the group of airmen, not that there's anything wrong with it, but if you hold hands with a man in public, you'll be perceived to be gay. Again, not that there's something wrong with that, but just to know the different interpretation. So guess what? I got a call the night of the Super Bowl. They said, Doctora Lubna, we are watching the Super Bowl and we see the men, they are holding hands, they're slapping each other on their rear end, they're picking each other up. Does that mean that the team is gay? And I said, not necessarily, but you never know, right? And so that's that's what's going to set you apart. Because again, thinking that we can reduce a people, a culture, to a do's and don'ts list is far simplistic, and it's far more complex, particularly when you've got global teams. So looking at how and recognizing the competitive edge for you and the place in which you'll be working really relates to the bottom line. The Institute for Corporate Productivity, 85% of firms that have 10,000 or more working for them said they must have and do have a domestic and a global strategy that includes cultural competency, cultural capability, cultural intelligence. It is no longer well, it's not a requirement, but it would be good if. I mean, every single one of you, if you're a student here, if you haven't yet done it, you must go abroad. You must live in a culture outside of your own. I know maybe we have international students, so you're already doing that by being here in the United States. I have been told, and Sherry, you might know better, that only 14% of U.S. Americans have a passport. Is that true, for what you
I
know?
don't know. There are so many stats about that and about the Congress that I can't verify that one way or another, but fortunately I think the awareness of the need for this is going up.
So the awareness is, but the point is, less than 20% of U.S. Americans have a U.S. passport. And those who have it, they don't necessarily are going beyond the Bahamas or Mexico or perhaps Canada. And the recognition, of course, and I'm speaking now as a U.S. American, it's absolutely essential. And looking at living the experience in the classroom is important. And I'm wondering, in your program in the business school, do you have a cross-cultural communication class that you're required to do, like the American University has? Is there? Okay, well, we'll deal with that policy later. So, and I'll be happy to tell you places where you can. But here's the bottom line. Nancy Adler in the International Dimensions of Organizations out of McGill University, research has shown over and over and over again that heterogeneous groups, culturally diverse groups, given that they've got the cultural capacity, the cultural intelligence, will outperform a homogeneous group. They will outperform a homogeneous group. And when I say homogeneous, that doesn't just mean by race or culture, but a group that is in an institution that's encouraged to think outside the box, not to just fit within a paradigm, a Western paradigm of thinking, but that there are different perspectives and thinking that comes into the boardroom, into the meetings, is absolutely essential. So let me give you some examples of where I've done some work. And I can tell you, back when I decided to get my master's degree in intercultural relations, my parents thought, well, what in the world are you going to do with a degree like that? And I truthfully thought I would, my intention was to be an international student advisor because I loved the exchange of students at American University. But I then went on to realize that I wanted to grow beyond the university campus and started connecting cultures 18 years ago. And one of the things that I never thought would be the places that would start to say, we want to understand culture. We need to understand culture. It's a requirement. So some of the places, for example, Walt Disney World. Walt Disney World brought us in for 3 whole days. They had us meet with executives down to every employee that wanted to come and to learn more about culture. And we were focusing on understanding Arabs and Muslim customers. And one of the things that they said is, we realized that when our guests come into our parks, that we would be asked about some of our best customers, we would be asked, where is the direction to Mecca? And we're like, what? Why would you need to know that? And I can tell you as a Muslim American, when I first went to Saudi Arabia and I was checking into one of the hotels, and on top of the dresser was an arrow. And at first I was thinking, well, wait a minute, what is that? And then I realized that that was telling me in order to know the direction of Mecca to perform prayer. It's small, but it makes an impact of recognizing the diversity of your customers. Walt Disney World got that because in Epcot, has anybody been to Epcot, the world? Well, they had added Saudi Arabia as a temporary And suddenly they had Saudis working for them, and it was the month of Ramadan. And suddenly Disney was saying, well, they have their shift from 12 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Well, guess what? What happens in Ramadan? They're fasting. So the Saudi workers were thinking, well, I can't work till 8 o'clock because my break fast is going to be at sunset. And so they had to recognize that they needed to negotiate and work out how they could be able to do their job, but also to make a accommodation in order to serve those workers that they have. Another place that I've done work with has been MasterCard. I went to Dubai, to the United Arab Emirates. There's a lot of business there, a lot. And in Dubai for MasterCard, it was a diversity initiative that they said every single employee with MasterCard must have this program, this training, to be able to look at, well, what does diversity mean? The enormous task of just interpreting diversity into multiple languages was a task, because what it meant in French to what it meant in Arabic gave very different intended messages based on the culture and the language. And so MasterCard recognized, and we did a lot of twisting and turning and tailoring that training so that it worked. And guess what? In Dubai, I did not have one Emirati in that training. The people that were working for MasterCard in Dubai were from England, were from South Africa, were from Lebanon, were from India, from Pakistan, from Japan. That was MasterCard's office in an Arab country. So again, breaking out of the paradigm that, oh, when I go to this country, I will deal with these people. That, who are these people when you will be interfacing with people from all over the world, depending on where you may be. Just recently, anybody know CBS? Yes, can't escape them. They bought all the old theaters in Washington, D.C. CBS just had us do training for over 200 managers, again, on building their cultural competency, because they're recognizing some of the considerations, because they started a new thing called Minute Clinic. Have you all heard this? And they recognize that they have people coming in, and there are differences of culture and faith that their staff and their team and their managers needed to be sensitive to. Now I'm going to tell you one of the customers that I can be public about that we got business due to cultural incompetency. It was one that you mentioned, Anna, which is Nike. Nike, every 3 or 4 months, has to come out with something like 20 to 50 logos for their shoes. And they had a logo. It looked good. And so guess what? The logo was out there, it was on their shoes, and who was making those Nike shoes? A manufacturing firm in Indonesia. And suddenly word was coming out from the manufacturing firm that we will no longer continue to make these shoes here, and we'll go on strike. And what came out was the logo for Air on the Nike shoe looked very close to the word Allah in Arabic. What does Allah mean? It means God. And so what happened was Nike said, well, we didn't mean it. It wasn't our intention. But when you work for a corporation or an organization and a cultural incompetency is committed, your customers don't say, oh, well, that was just one person, right, at Nike, in this example. It's Nike. And so companies are recognizing it is a liability if their teams are not culturally diverse and understanding the international designs. And that team, in the end, Nike took a long time to get it. A boycott was threatened against Nike coming out of many Muslim nations, and there are over 1 billion Muslims in the world. And so we, Connecting Cultures, as a part of the settlement, had gone to do the training. And I'll never forget this. We were not there to slap anybody on their hand. We did not think, as some in the Muslim community thought, this was a conspiracy. Nike initially was going to make the shoe and have Allah deface the name of God. And by the way, this would not be just offensive to Muslims, but also to Arab Christians, because it's not, Allah is not a Muslim God, it's simply the Arabic word for God. So anyway, the designer, we did a training just for the design team, and I'll never forget the young man. He said, you know, this was coming out of, we were trying to promote summer sports, summer basketball, and I came up with the idea of the flame script. And that was why I came up with this script that looked, if you got any Islamic calligrapher, they would see it as Allah. And he said, I didn't mean it, I didn't mean it. We said, we recognize it, but you have to recognize the impact, unintentional that it may be. And at that point, he just was so stuck in that. So then one of my co-facilitators, Alex Cronemer, he said, this means something to you, doesn't it? Does this feel any better for me to tell you I didn't mean it? I don't know that this is offensive to you? And then he stopped. He says, I get it. And that's it. That it's not good enough to say anymore in organizations, in corporations, to say, well, it's not intended. It's too much of a cost in our global market. And having people around that table who can see what someone else won't be able to see is absolutely important and necessary. Okay, I just want to tell you that since 9/11, I thought my business would be out of business. And my first call came from the Department of Justice, because as some of you may know, there was a backlash towards Arabs and Muslims and those perceived to be. And the Justice Department called me after 9/11, and they said, we received your name, and we need you. And I'm thinking, you need me for what? Because I had never heard from the Justice Department. But what had happened was, immediately after those attacks, the first casualty was within 24 hours of a man who was neither Muslim nor Arab, but of a Sikh man. And as he screamed the words, I'm a patriot, he was shot to death. And the Department of Justice said, we need our police officers, our first responders, to understand culture, to understand religion, because we need to remain a united America and not let this divide our nation. And so Connecting Cultures has been training law enforcement around the country. So law enforcement also, I mean, I focus on the corporation, but I can tell you that they more and more recognizing the diversity of their communities and their customers has been essential. And I don't know how some of you might respond to this, but in the last 6 months, we've just finished training U.S. Marines out in Camp Pendleton, California. And that too, and I have to say as an American, I think there's been a sense of humility that this war has not gone as anticipated by some of those in the government. And they called, and they, because I have my own opinions about the war, but they said, we need to understand the people, we need to understand the culture, we need to understand the religion. And I can tell you that there's been a major, particularly in the Marines, I don't think all the armed services, but the Marines have said we need to wear the soft glove. So from corporate to government to military, and I'm not even including all my wonderful schools and nonprofits, there is a major demand for understanding and looking at what is culture and what do we need to know and how important it is. So I've given you the pragmatic benefits. What are the personal ones? It's pretty awesome. I mean, I get to travel. I love travel. Sherry, I'm sure many here can share the same. I just returned from Granada, Spain. I can tell you the personal satisfaction. I've been involved with groups like Seeds of Peace that brings together Israelis and Palestinian teenagers. We've met in a camp in Maine, but also we then went on to Bosnia to see what a nation does when it is divided. And what are we talking about? How to understand the culture and the language of one another to build peace. So your number one requirement to be in the field, what do you think it is? What do you think? What's your number one requirement? Language is important, but it's the P word, passion. I mean, yes, it's smart. You are business majors predominantly in this room. It's a smart thing to do, but to have the passion behind it. It is an imperative to understand the science of culture and cross-cultural communication and to have the language capacity. We were just at a conference, Diversity Best Practices, where there was a person, I just even brought the paper with me, Dr. Patricia Taylor of intelligence, the intelligence community. I keep forgetting, what was she?
Central Intelligence.
Thank you, Central Intelligence. And guess what did she say? What was the number one thing that she brought up in the opening of her session?
Cross-cultural communication is extremely important, and the experience that goes with it.
And so they've added onto their looking for people, they said language capability and cultural competency and cultural experience. So again, thinking outside of where you might the fun stuff are the corporations, perhaps you think, but in the government, in the intelligence community, there is a range of needs and understanding. So I want you all now, I've gone on pretty much, I want for you to close your eyes right now. I'm not going to do anything to you. I promise, just take a moment. If you're not comfortable closing your eyes, you can lower your gaze. Believe me, I've done this with police officers and they hate it, so. Open your eyes. First thoughts.
Different person.
Pardon?
You're a different person.
I'm a different person. What else? I'm a foreigner. Yep. Mashallah, which means what God wills. What else? Some of the ones I hear don't speak English, backward, uneducated, not from here. Not my friend, terrorist, suicide bomber, can't play sports. This is your biggest barrier, is as business majors and as students today, is you have got to turn off the tape. The tapes that are playing all the time, I'm focusing on this right now, but are tapes about when you hear or think French or Ethiopian or Chinese or British or Brazilian, Argentinian or American. You must, in your cultural intelligence, is turn off the tapes. You heard what she said, and I thank you for being upfront and honest. She said different person. There are women who do cover their hair who are told, you looked good on paper, but this won't fit here. That's someone who's missing an opportunity for someone who has much to bring. And so throughout your life as students, but I'm going to tell you as adults, please remember, when I say those tapes, I don't think we can erase them. We've all got stereotypes, and we could do a whole session on our assumptions about one another. But please remember, in wherever you'll be working, whatever you'll be doing, to push pause, because relying on your stereotypes to communicate, to prepare a briefing, to work, to negotiate, will take you down a slippery slope. Okay? I'm still the same person. I just have a piece of cloth on my head, right? But yet the perception changes. So with that, I thank you. I'm excited that you're all here. I'm available to you all after this session, but I really want us to go to the next piece, which is our esteemed panel, and I'll leave it at that. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much to our keynote speaker. We're now going to go on to our first panelist, Alexei Kulikov, who is a business manager with Microsoft in their Global Enterprise Research and Development team. Alexei is of Ukrainian descent, majored in business Spanish and business management at the University of Maryland in College Park. He's currently also pursuing an MBA at Georgetown University. And Alexei was actually a student of mine at the University of Maryland, and he's continued to impress me throughout the years, and I'm so excited to have him back to speak about how he has been able to use his cross-cultural communication skills and language skills in his career. So please join me in welcoming Alexei.
Well, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Vivi. This was very inspirational. Anna just mentioned that I'm actually working towards my MBA degree, and when I came in, they said that the MBA students are on that side. So I'm absolutely one of us, one of you guys. I'm an American, I'm Russian, I'm from Ukraine, so I guess I'm Ukrainian. I'm so many things, and it's kind of scary. You know, they talk about identity conflict and identity issues. It was very scary to me for a long time. You know, in fact, my mother is Jewish and my father is Russian. And when I say that, I do not actually imply anything religious at all. When I say that, I know that both of my parents are secular, as most people in the former Soviet Union. So for us, Jewish and Russian are actually two different, almost like two different races. It's two different ethnicities, or what we call nationalities. In fact, every person in the Soviet Union until I think 1992 or so, in their passport, and everybody had to have a passport as long as they were 16, as opposed to here, even though nobody traveled abroad. So they had what we call the fifth line, like the fifth item on their passport that basically identified them in terms of their ethnicity. It was quite difficult, you know, when you had mixed parents. It was like, wow, how did that happen? You know, but when you turned 16, you could actually choose, and you can imagine that, you know, with a really severe anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union, many people chose, if they had the opportunity, they could choose to be Russian. It was very easy in my case because my name is Russian, my first name, my last name is Russian. You know, I'm not Zuckerman or Robinson or something like that. Right? So that was very, very easy. And another kind of lucky thing was that I actually left Ukraine before I was 16, so I didn't have to choose. But you should have heard the conversation I had with my mother when I said, I think, it's time to make a statement about this. I know that my grandfather had an opportunity to change his nationality, but he did not, and I think I'm going to follow in his steps. And I really feel, as Russian as I feel Jewish, culturally or ethnically or whatever it is, and I think that's what I'm going to put in my passport. She was really mad. She was really mad, and I think it tells us a lot about what really exists in the world and how long of a road we have ahead of us. So I came from Ukraine to the United States, and I spoke little English. It was, let's see, wow, 12 years ago. Very little English, and then I had a couple of ESL classes. You guys know what it is. And I was in school with a lot of foreigners, but also a lot of Americans, and it was very interesting because I could understand much more than I could speak. It took a couple of months to come about, and I really people were kind of scared of me. Some people, and then I think that certain people thought that I was kind of, wow, what's wrong with him kind of situation. Things changed after they realized that I was really good in math. So I realized I don't want this. There's something I need to connect. I really need to build here, and I really put a lot of effort into learning English and learning fast, and not get scared, not get resentful, which happens to a lot of immigrants. Where they become profoundly nationalistic, and then all kinds of problems come from that. So it's kind of like it's an escalation. So I went to the university and majored in biology. Since I was 3 years old, I wanted to be a doctor. My family thought it was a really good idea. And then I decided, no, this is really not for me. My family thought it was a really bad idea. So I actually majored in Spanish. And whoa, how do you take that? This Russian guy who came, he's struggling to speak English, and why is he majoring in Spanish? It's a little bit masochistic, if anything, So I think because by that time, first of all, I've always been passionate about Spanish language. I thought it's absolutely beautiful. And also I was interested in the culture of Spain, and I was really getting into dance. You probably read in my bio a little bit about that. So it was really important. It was really, really exciting. And I thought that was my opportunity to do this thing. And so one more thing that happened by that time, and that is, and I kind of realized it post-factum, I realized that I really appreciated the fact of how much we gain from learning a foreign language, and how much we gain from knowing more than 2 languages, and so on. I think it's important to emphasize what it's been for me. The idea that language for many people who speak only one language is something very natural. You don't think about it unless you have to. There's a word that you came across. Most of the time we skip it actually. And we don't even remember that we had it. Sometimes we look it up and so on. But for me it was a defining thing really. What I mean by that is it took me to learn English and be in America to understand my culture better. It took me to learn Spanish and spend some time in Spain to understand American culture better, and then again Russian culture better. I also know for a fact that it increased my ability to actually go between the perspectives very, very quickly, and it's very applicable in business. When I actually got out of school, I was about to get out of school, I was extremely anxiety ridden. You guys are much better off. You have like business school on your resume and all that stuff. I had, School of Arts and Humanities, foreign languages. I'm like, what? What do you do with that? Right? So it was one of those situations that I really did not know what I wanted to do, and I was so passionate. Anna remembers all of those days I used to come to her office, So, and I actually went into the field. It kind of happened serendipitously. I ended up in healthcare informatics. Maybe it's that mom telling me you really have to be a doctor, so I thought I at least would work with doctors. So, and really quickly I realized that because of my experiences of immigration, of learning another language, of spending more time in another country, I by then had really wonderful skills of understanding when people cannot communicate and knowing how to help that, and also communicating with a person, even in the same language. How many situations, guys, have you seen where you have two people, two Americans, two people speaking English as their native language, not understanding each other? It's every day. So this is something that is built. It's a skill that you build to be able to communicate, to realize when the other person does not understand you. So in fact, my first job was in marketing, and then I actually went on to connect the programmers and application developers and database administrators who spoke their own language with doctors and nurses and hospital administrators who spoke yet another language. It was not English, trust me. Nasopharyngeal tumor is not something we use every day. Hopefully, it's not something we have every day even. So this is something that really helped me define me as a person, and it's something that I know gave me an extraordinary competitive advantage, and it's something that I truly believe expanded not only my ability to go between perspectives, which is important for survival, for business, whatever it is, but it also expanded my ability to think in dimensions and structures. There are plenty of examples where there are ways to express something in one language, and there is no such way to express it in another language. Things like guanxi in Chinese, or saudade, in Portuguese. Whatever it is, it's a new way of thinking. It's that extra margin that you get if you're in business, where you can get that customer because you really understand that it's just so many things. So that's how I ended up in healthcare, and then Microsoft Corporation actually bought the company that I used to work for. Microsoft is of course international, and we recently acquired another team in Thailand. I ended up in Thailand. I don't speak Thai, a couple of words, now, and hoping to learn more. And I saw probably a dozen situations a day where here's an American speaking to a Thai person, and a Thai person, I know that they're saying no, but they're saying yes. And it's something that only I could see. I was like going, hey, come on, they really don't want that. They do not agree with that. And in fact, in Thai language, there is no explicit word for no. It's actually yes, no, something like that. So you have to have that awareness. And when we started traveling there, it was kind of like, oh yeah, guys, and read this. It was some summary of Thai culture that we were supposed to read on the plane. Now it's a requirement. You go to Thailand, you read this thing, you almost take an exam. I was lucky enough to take a course with Anna on culture environment of global business. And it was like an injection of all these do's and don'ts, but also expanding your ability, your awareness of thinking about this stuff. It's extremely inspirational. It's extremely insightful, and this is something that we absolutely cannot live without. I'm a business manager, 200 people all over the world. We have a team in China, a team in Thailand, and Netherlands, Sweden. Here in the United States, I'm constantly connecting people. I'm constantly finding opportunities to improve communication and so on. So this is, again, really, really defining to me. And finally, I just wanted to say one thing. There is sometimes a point where we overestimate our understanding of other cultures, or even if we say that we're fluent in the language, don't overestimate it. There is such depth to it. And even if you lived in this country all your life, you are going to be confronted with a point. It's like having an accent. It's the same with cross-cultural communication. It can be the same language, but there is going to be a little bit of that prism. Well, however much we try to turn off that tape, a little bit of that tape is going to come through at some point. So be aware of that. Be aware that it's still there. It's okay. We can strive better. There is always a point to go beyond. And whatever we cannot cover, by learning another language or by another culture, is going to be left for our posterity to deal with. It's certainly going to be left to be decided whether it's going to be a war or whether we can create art with it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Alexi. I know some people have to go to classes. They've already forewarned me. Okay, good. Our next speaker, Neetu Gupta, is the Vice President of Food and Nutrition Product Development for the Sodexo Healthcare Division. She has been with Sodexo for over 20 years and is the chair of its Pan-Asian Network, which has helped establish Sodexo as one of the top 10 companies for Asians to work at. And please welcome Neetu Gupta.
It was actually interesting listening to both speakers, and I was wondering, they have deep-rooted cultural background, cross-cultural background and experience. What do I bring? And then it clicked. When I came to this country, how many of you here are first generation? When I came to this country, I did like you. I went to school, studied, then joined my first company, my first job, and talk about cross-cultural, talk about language. I was working on, how many of you have worked in a kitchen? None of you. Okay. Well, Sodexo, I joined Sodexo. This is my first company that I worked for, and I've been working now for 20-some years. When I joined, that time it was Marriott. When I joined Marriott, I worked in a kitchen in a nursing home where we prepared resident trays in an assembly line situation. So imagine an assembly line, you've got people on both ends, and they're really, putting together those resident trays. Well, I was a runner, and my job was to replenish products that would finish. Or if the residents would ask for something special, I would have to go to the kitchen or to the storeroom and get those. Well, somebody asked me for sherbet. How many of you know what sherbet is? What is it? It's a frozen product, much like ice cream. Well, the place where I came from, sherbet is a syrupy beverage that you mix in with water and offer to your guests. It is in a bottle, and it is a dry storage product. Well, each time they asked me, I would run to the storeroom and look for a bottle that had a pink-colored syrupy solution. And of course, there was no bottle to be found. I would come back and say, well, there is none. And they would continue to say, well, we just got the delivery yesterday. How could it be that we ran out of those? And finally, long story short, it was kind of a learning experience for me. And that was not the end of it. When I would put the meals together, they would say, well, beef and peas go together. And I'd say, well, what? Why do you have to have beef and peas together and mashed potatoes? So those are some learning, some very basic things that you really don't even think about, but are true and can really be a defining moment, your moments of truth. And when I started working, coming from an Asian background, I was told you should not be looking straight into your supervisor's eyes. When they're talking with you, you look down. Guess what happens? Well, you talk with your supervisor with your eyes down. They think you're not even listening, paying attention. So there is a direct conflict right there. Or when they ask you questions, you're supposed to nod your head. You're not supposed to go in and actually object if you have any objections or say anything more. Think of your performance. Think of your impressions. Think of your growth within that environment. Very dismal. If you don't understand that culture, it is very hard. Think of now going to another culture from America, which is has certain values, certain beliefs, certain behaviors, and you take it into that environment of an Asian culture, where I came from, where you don't say no, you don't say yes. you just beat around the bush because you're not supposed to be displeasing anybody by saying no. And you're just supposed to say yes, even though you really want to say no. You know, you are talking about time, understanding the value of time. If you are in business negotiations, you don't understand the concept of time, where they can just come in whenever they feel like, but their expectation is that you would be on time, and they respect you for that, being on time. Those little subtleties can make a huge impact on the outcome. Now, in today's global economy, you know, you would say, well, who really, you know, for many of us, we work for companies that are really, we're only just within U.S. Why do we have to bother? But if you really look at the employees we serve, the customers we serve, the clients we negotiate with, the suppliers. Now, how many of us here drink the fair trade coffee? How many of us think of all the third world countries, and how they're impacting our products that have come into this country or our economy? All those have an impact on us. Understanding those cultures are critical. To the extent that we can really show, now of course, in Lexi's case, he was very fortunate. He got a chance to really brush up on his eye. There are many times when we're thrown into situations where we don't get a chance to really brush up on anything. As long as you're willing to have an open mind, as long as you're willing to communicate and tell them you're there to really work with them, as long as you're there showing some intent, the right intent, people are willing to give you and cut some slack. But you really have to try. Lobna mentioned something about how critical it is to have this experience of cross-culture, whether through internship. Somebody mentioned the internship. You know, that's a great opportunity. Or if you don't get that, you know, if you have an opportunity to go back to your company, that's even wonderful. We at Sodexo, we work in 80 countries. So imagine the mix we have. Now, knowing full well that not all of us have had the opportunity to work in different countries, but because business takes us there, we have actually provided tools. We have a cultural navigator, which is a web-based tool where you can go in, get an assessment of where you are culturally, because self-awareness is also critical. It was important for me to know what I knew and what I didn't know. So you get an assessment, and then based on where you're going, you can actually go through that tool and help you learn some of those different aspects. We also offer, in my introduction, you were told that I am the chair of Pan-Asian Network Group. For Sodexo, it is extremely important that we encourage diversity and really harness the potential that diversity brings in, because really the successful companies are those companies that respect and really cultivate that diversity to its fullest. So we have currently 6 network groups, and these network groups are not there to create silos, but they're very inclusive. Even in the Pan-Asian Network Group, we have over 300 members, and of those 300 members, 50 are of Asian descent, rest are all allies. Now, it's an interesting mix, but our intent, our mission through that network group is really to help grow the Asians personally and professionally by providing them opportunities in a safe environment, but at the same time, help those non-Asians or allies learn about the Asian culture, increase the awareness. So those are some things that we really encourage because of the fact cross-cultural competency is extremely, extremely important. In today's environment, for any company to survive, whether they are a global player or just a US company, it is extremely important for you to understand and appreciate what other cultures have to offer, what they actually have, what is it in terms of the language, in terms of the knowledge, in terms of the people, in terms of their expectations. I was actually doing, we also offer cross-cultural communications training. And one of the exercises, there was many role-playing opportunities there, but one of them involved little cards. On one side of those cards were the names of the countries, and on the other side were some colored designs or shapes. And we just had to pair based on those shapes. Well, I was paired with another lady who had Hawaii on the back of her card, and I was from Japan. Now, when you look at two of us, and we were asked to greet each other, Hawaii people are very warm, huggy people, whereas Japanese people, right, they want their space. Now, Hawaii person was trying to do this, whereas the Japanese person was trying to do this. In that whole mix, it was such an awkward position, and we didn't think about it until that moment, and that was such an aha moment for us. Simple thing as a greeting could offend somebody not knowing what the other culture expectation is. So, in the end, all I would say is the success for you lies in your ability to really understand and your ability to be open to other cultures and understand that for effective communication, for successful business, cross-cultural communication and other languages are extremely, extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bobby Jefferson, our next speaker, is someone I've relied on for years to join different panels on topics relating to international careers. He's currently working for Futures Group International as a healthcare management information systems advisor. You might have something to talk to Alexei about eventually. Much of his work has been done in Africa, but he does speak Russian and has extensive experience working in Eastern and Central Europe as well. So please join me in welcoming Bobby Jefferson.
Добрый вечер. Just quickly, my background. I graduated from American University, computer science, with a Russian studies minor. Can anyone figure out why a computer science person would want to study Russian? So had those two mix of topics in terms of subject matter and studying was quite challenging, needless to say. Once I graduated, began to work for USAID, USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development. Please stop me if I use acronyms because I'm going to have a little bit more of a business sense because I think there's some people on the international, on the business side, and we do a lot of work, our company does a lot of work with USAID and with Center for Disease Control, CDC, World Bank, the international donors. And after I began working for USAID, they immediately deployed myself and a team of other people to beautiful Ukraine, Russia, St. Petersburg in January. And so that was a lot of fun. But what I learned about that experience that can be helpful is the team did not consist of people who looked just like me, but the team consisted of people from Bulgaria. The team consisted of people from Ethiopia. The team consisted of women from Jordan. And we're all working on the same USAID project in Belarus. Now, talking about cross-cultural communication, how do you keep a team together? The most difficult part was going through airports and customs because they always wanted to separate people out from a business standpoint. The most difficult part was hotels because all the foreigners, they wanted to put in the nice hotel suites. And our local Ukrainian and Belarusian partners had a different set of hotel spaces to reside in. and different pricing. So, the challenge that we faced as a company was how to take people who are not Americans, but from India and Bulgaria and Ethiopia, and let not us to communicate, but them to communicate together as well. Because that's another fact of life in my company going forward. So we have offices in Ukraine where we're doing a futures group. The company, 350 people, and 90% of our folks are in the field. We hire people with language skills and internships around language and opportunities around travel. But most of the people are in the field. We have office in Ukraine, office in India, Beijing, and I wake up every morning at 6 a.m. to communicate to the India office. And I've just missed by 4 hours the Beijing office, and because we're developing software and systems, as Alexa, and so how to keep a team of people together who are in India, and when you ask them is something done or complete, the answer is yes. Is this done? Yes. Can I come and visit you? Yes. And then when you arrive, I didn't really mean that. I just the yes was just to keep you as a manager, just to keep you going. But the type of work that we do at Futures is international development. So what we do is we work across many of the developing countries, but the people we work with usually don't speak English. They don't have access to running water, clean water. They live out in the rural areas, and they usually have health issues. So the area that I work in is the HIV/AIDS and the infectious disease area. And what we do is we try to provide help, support, and capacity for those people. Now, the difficult part is what I try to do every day is work myself out of a job. My job isn't to communicate to people so that I can have them continually depend on our company. Our role is to make it sustainable, to do what we can to do the training, to build the capacity in country so they do the work. So what typically happens on our project is called Age of Leaf Project, and my colleague Ian Wanyeki is visiting from Kenya for this week. We have 30 people visiting from 9 countries. And our job is to essentially work ourselves out of a job and transfer the knowledge over without transferring the U.S. mindset. So what we typically see is that many companies that work on USAID projects and World Bank projects and donor projects, they say, I have the solution. You're in Africa, you're in Ukraine, I have the solution. This is the model. Use my model. And then when you get into country, you see people, again, they'll say, be very polite. Yes. Okay, no problem. But you'll find just like the voltage from the U.S. doesn't work overseas, the same sort of thing. Models that we develop in the U.S. have to work and be customized by the local people, by the country itself. That's the only way for it to work. They have to take ownership of it. Because typically what happens is after we leave, after the funding's gone, after the money's not there, then the model falls apart. The people no longer do the work. And so that's why we really strive very hard to have a participatory a process where people come up with a solution themselves. That's what our role is. It's not for us to give them a solution, but to help them come up with a solution that works for them. Because what works in Rwanda and Haiti, which of course are bilingual countries, will not work in Zambia and will not work in South Africa. And then we also then try to say how to develop the people into leaders. Because what's the sense of leading capacity if you don't build a leadership that can be advocates for what they need? So we also put together a training course, especially around IT. So you create teams, and that team lead, now you have to build that person to say how to respond to performance management, how to be able to accept criticism, how to be able to manage a team, and how to create that person, help that person, enable them become a leader, so that way they can carry the things forward. And so that's again what we do on the future side. So the importance of language skills, the importance of cross-cultural communication are definitely things that we look for, and that other international donors look for as well. Just a quick reality of the business side. There's a process called business development. I'm not sure if people are aware of it, but that's one of the ways that these international projects become funded. and we do a lot of business development work with USAID, with DFID, which is the UK's donor, with the Australians. So we really try to have a mix, at least on our project and our team, a mix of projects and people. So our projects are HIV/AIDS, being able to provide support for people in country, malaria, tuberculosis projects. We also have what's called social marketing. Social marketing. Sometimes you get a little bit dicey. The social marketing is around behavior and doing condom distributions. So, for example, in Afghanistan, in order to do prevention type work, our company helps to fund and distribute and support companies that actually do that social marketing aspect. In order, we work with indigenous drug use, IDUs, infectious injection drug users, be able to give them prevention strategies so that they don't become, vectors as well. We work with high-risk groups. And all of this I'm trying to say is because the way that you have to communicate to people is highly important. The work that we do, ultimately, we put you on a plane, you go to the major city, for example, if you're going to Nigeria, go to Abuja, and then once you get to the major city, now you drive 6 to 8 hours in the rural countryside where the real need and the real effort occurs. And so that's what our company and Futures does. So again, we really, when we're looking at CVs and looking at students who are looking at internships, that's what we look for, people who have the passion. Because you don't do this for the money. You don't go to places that have no running water, no clean food. You don't do that for the money. You do it because you want to engage people. You do it because you have the passion to help. And fortunately, I've been very fortunate to have been doing it for 15 years. And so, again, I hope that you also begin to think about and choose and stay in this career field as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Our last panelist is Dr. Sherry Mueller, and she's the president of the National Council for International Visitors. She's worked for many years in international education and has recently published a book titled Working World, Careers in International Education Exchange and Development. And we are really looking forward to hearing more about the book, and there will be a book signing afterwards as well.
Меня зовут Шерри, и сегодня я не буду говорить по-русски, потому что я забыла все уже. I'm not going to speak Russian tonight because I've forgotten it all, which does not mean I don't support the thrust of the panel. I think it's absolutely critical, and I'm delighted to be here to underscore the value of cross-cultural communications, or what Luby referred to as cultural intelligence and language proficiency. I want to thank Anna for inviting me. I'm delighted to participate. I always like to have the opportunity to mention the National Council for International Visitors. I grew up in Illinois with nothing international in my background whatsoever, on a farm, and wound up making an international career and staying in the United States for most of the time. I've been privileged to travel a lot, but I head a nonprofit and our mission is to promote excellence in citizen diplomacy, the notion that each individual has a responsibility to help shape foreign relations one handshake at a time, as our 91 member organizations all across the country in every major city in the United States express it. So I basically am a cheerleader for 80,000 volunteers around the country who work hosting the foreign leaders who come on the U.S. Department of State's International Visitor Program and a lot of other exchanges. I'm also glad to just share a minute or two about some of the lessons that are distilled in the book Working World, Careers in International Education, Exchange and Development. My co-author is 28, and it really is an intergenerational dialogue about what it means not to just find jobs, but to build a career in the international field. And I'm also delighted to be here because whenever I have an opportunity to share the stage with my former student, Luby, I'm just delighted to do that. I'm so proud of what she's accomplished in her career, and she is one of 12 people profiled in the book. And one of the points of the book is that it's for idealists. The emphasis on passion is absolutely right, and Bobby just said you're not in it for the money in most of the kinds of careers we're describing. A couple of other things I just wanted to add, maybe traits to cultivate in addition to the cross-cultural, the cultural intelligence and the language proficiency. Most important, and I think Nita, you made the point, you have to have an open mind. When I led my first group of students to the then Soviet Union and got to stay in Ukraine, where I was explaining to Alexei earlier, it wasn't always the students that had the most fluent Russian, and everybody had to have Russian even to be on the trip. It was the students that were genuinely curious, that had that capacity to convey a real interest in learning about the other culture. And like Nita said, they forgive you a lot if you can convey that genuine desire to learn. Adaptability. And I'm going to use a kind of simplistic example. You always hear about you need to walk in the other person's shoes. Well, I always feel you need to wear the other person's clothes. I share with Bobby a very strong interest in leadership and what makes leaders and what we think of as principles of leadership in the United States translate abroad and what are quite cultural specific. And I was invited by some doctors in Saudi Arabia and ultimately by our embassy to speak on NGO leadership, non-governmental leadership, with different audiences in Saudi Arabia. And it was very interesting because my contact at the embassy said, I said, well, do I need to take an abaya? I'd already figured out, I borrowed one from Ambassador Cutler's wife. No, you don't need one. Well, I was dressed very conservatively, but when I got to the hotel, I was handed an abaya, and I started to wear it. And it was very clear to me as I started to wear it that my message would get through much more effectively if I had it on than if I insisted in some perverse way not to adapt. So it's been interesting to me as I've tried out clothes, as I've traveled around the world. I don't know if we have anybody from the Philippines in the audience, but some of you are familiar with those wonderful dresses with the butterfly sleeves. And they're actually little air conditioning units. When you actually wear one, you start to realize the logic of the cultures that you're dealing with. And just one other clothing example, when I was in Vietnam, I thought, these women are so graceful. They are so, their posture is so good. And then my friends in Vietnam had an auzai made for me, which was a trip at the time. And I put it on and I realized why they were so graceful. You couldn't move any other way, the way the dress was constructed. And so I like to think about, it's important to wear the other person's clothes. It's important to try on the other person's decision-making processes. There are so many ways that I think cultural differences are fascinating, but probably the aha moments are the ones where you really realize the common human aspirations. A couple of just career tips. And there are a number of favorite quotations in the book. One of them is, like Alice, most of us think we want to go somewhere. And it takes some experience to learn that in life, there is no somewhere, and we are always on the way. One thing I would encourage you to do as you interview for jobs, make sure you like the people you're going to work with. Sometimes it doesn't matter as much what they call you in terms, or to some extent, it matters that they pay you enough, but how much they pay you over what you really need. But if you like the people you're dealing with and you like the tasks that you're going to do hour after hour, that's the real measure, I think, of one's happiness, because you really are always on the way. One of the things I talk about in the book is the importance of building blocks, and I just really want to underscore what Luby said when she said you've got to go abroad if you haven't done it already. When I review resumes, and I used to work for the Institute of International Education, a major nonprofit, and now, of course, NCIB, and I always look for that building block, that experience that says you know how to adapt, you know how to handle a challenging situation. Maybe it's Peace Corps, maybe it's leading an experiment in international living group, maybe it's being an AFS student, maybe, and I'm glad I mentioned in the book ISEC, since you had the folks here. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal organization and way to get that basic building block. So with that, I know we wanted to, Anna, get some questions. I just would be glad to talk to you at length about the book individually. It's been a wonderful journey to try to distill the lessons that have come from working in the nonprofit field, and also that it does involve a fair amount of travel. So thank you all for your attention. You're very patient.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that we are going to now go directly to the audience. I'm sure there are plenty of questions. And Alex has the microphone in the back there, so why don't we go ahead?
For companies that are thinking of going abroad and contemplating which areas to go to, maybe pick an area, you guys talked about how to learn the culture, but really, what should they do? I mean, what courses should they take? Should they go there, a few months before and spend a month or so there trying to learn it, or what exactly should they do?
Well, there's always an opportunity to outsource, right? Microsoft knows how to do that. There are situations, I'm not sure whether we need to talk about this, that when there isn't an opportunity to brush up on the skills because you need to make a decision. I mean, business decisions are business decisions. Sometimes you have the time to study and understand, and sometimes you don't, and you know this is a really great opportunity. So if you have an opportunity to outsource and bring in experts, yes, you may get lucky, you may not. Your current understanding of cultures and languages will probably help you understand how good your contractor is. Sherry speaks in her book about contractor that clearly was not really good, helping set up some conference. So you have those opportunities. If you do have time to explore, absolutely explore. If you can afford going to that country and spend some time there, I guarantee you're going to be better off. So it's what you can afford as far as time and money.
I just wanted to add to this. Sometimes it may not be things that are provided by the company, but it may be your own. But there are many times where the companies now, because they've recognized the importance of this, have tools and training opportunities that really help you in getting that competency, because it is important. So tools like I mentioned, the web-based tool or the cross-cultural training, those are some very basic opportunities that our companies are now offering.
I want to just add, one of the best institutes is out of Portland, the Summer Institute for Intercultural Communication, and you could go there for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So please go to their website, because if you want to kind of build your knowledge and they have many different types of workshops and training, and they bring the best in the field of intercultural communication. So the Summer Institute of Intercultural Communication would be one I'd recommend. You're young. I have 3 children, older now. When you graduate, just buy a ticket somewhere and go. I mean, really, it won't hurt you, and it can only help you in terms of the growth that you'll have as a person, and how you can bring that experience later on into whatever work that you might do.
My question is specifically for Bobby Jefferson. I was reading on the handout that the Futures Group is playing a role in the PEPFAR program. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, forward-looking, this might be a question, I don't know if you can answer it given that you're an IT advisor, not necessarily a public relations strategist, but with the current financial crisis in America, it's making people really nervous. And are you anticipating objections to the $50 billion PEPFAR program over the next 5 years? And how are you going to address that to the American people in a way that lets them know that yes, they may be suffering, but it's important that we keep our commitment to the Global AIDS Initiative.
You're right. I can't answer the big question, but I can just give a little bit about what our perception is. And what our perception is that PEPFAR initially started out at $15 billion, PEPFAR 1, and now it's grown to and improved at $48 billion. And once the U.S. government has started to provide drugs to patients in Africa, once you start on antiretrovirals, you have to take them for the rest of your life. So it's not a process where you can start and then stop, because then you're literally committing genocide to millions of people who are dependent on the drugs that you're providing. So in many of the cases in terms of PEPFAR 2, what they're looking at is taking a role away from the large, companies, central large, and making the role much more indigenous organizations, local companies. So that's where the transition is happening towards the end of PEPFAR. They're actually writing that into the legislation, where the work and the funding and the money has to now just be at the indigenous, the local in-country, rather than where it sits at right now. But the larger overall commitment and with regards to the budget and administration, I can't answer that. I can only say that once we've committed, and the U.S. has, we said that we will provide these drugs for as long as they're alive. If that's 20 years, some people it's becoming a chronic disease. That's 20 years.
Hello. My question is kind of for everybody. I tend to find in classes and different discussions that when you talk about cultural intelligence or cultural literacy, people tend to regionalize and talk about Asia or Africa or Latin America. And I know that obviously every country within those regions are distinctly different, and they have subcultures within that are distinctly different. So how do you delve a little bit deeper and make sure that you're not just regionalizing culture?
Years ago, there was some very interesting research by Dr. John Using, decades ago, and he developed the concept of a third culture, and that people who traveled a lot actually had and lived a rather international life had more in common with each other than they did necessarily with their home country compatriots, or than they did with the country to which they were stationed. And so this whole concept for a while was very popular, called the third culture. And I think one of the things that's very interesting is how multicultural so many different cultures are becoming. On the International Visitor Leadership Program, one of the really interesting articles about the program came from, it was a New York Times article, June 8th, that you can look up. And our embassy in France had invited Muslims from the Paris suburbs who were educators and bloggers to come and participate in this 3-week kind of PR for Uncle Sam program. And for whatever reason, this was picked up. And it's just, you almost can't even discuss culture in a traditional way anymore. And it's very exciting stuff, actually. But that's just one example of where most Americans, when they think about funding, and I am concerned about what's going to happen when people really realize what the interest on the debt is. I worry very much about the 150 account and AID and State Department and things that are funded there. But your question is interesting, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about it after this more. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to add anything, because I know, honey, you want to get as many as we can get in before the reception.
Just out of the CTAR conference in Grenada, there was a lot of talk about the global nomad no longer is the same, and that it's someone who has had that experience and traveled of a country that they're not a member of, they didn't grow up in, and people are just moving from one place to another. And I think starting with that open mind curiosity, sincerity. I can tell you that no matter what culture, they can read sincerity and humility, which is, I always say the U.S. Americans have a long way to go because we're walking around with that capital letter A across our chest that stands for arrogance. It just is there. And so those traits can be a great start. And to be able to really be open to learn and to understand that person and that in that place.
My question is for Louis, and you mentioned the example of Nike where they didn't realize that the slogan that they had for their shoes meant Allah in Arabic.
Yeah.
And my question for you really is what would be the best way for companies and organizations to realize all these different cultural differences, considering the dozens or hundreds of cultural different meanings there are across all those various different numbers of cultures?
Diversify, diversify, diversify. That you must have a diversity of people. And again, not just based on, skin color or religion, but how they perceive the world, the broader, diverse way of perception is absolutely critical. And in this conference of diversity best practices, the biggest problem today is when organizations say, we're diverse, look, we've got African Americans, we've got Spanish speaking people, but they're all in groupthink, right? Because they're all told, make sure we think all alike, right? We see the world all the same. That's not the diversity that needs to happen. And so when you go into an organization or a place, ask them, who do you have in your organization? And I'm going to tell you, one of the best advice I can give you is when you call someone and you say, I'm looking for a job, and then they say, well, we don't have any job openings now. Where's the call going to go from there? Thank you very much, bye-bye. But ask to do an informational interview. People love to talk about themselves. And so to be able to do an informational interview, you can get a lot of information by learning about what they do. And it can open a way for you to learn more about the organization. You may not walk out with a job, but you may leave that information. Say, is there somebody else in the field that you might recommend I would talk with as well? It's something, it helped me 20 plus years ago, was being able to do informational interviews and how much I walked away with. But diversity is absolutely critical.
If I could just tag on to what Luby said, almost information interviews, I put people together to do them because I don't have time to do them. But if somebody says, I'm writing a paper and I'm researching leadership and I need to talk to you about my research, that's irresistible. So plan your papers carefully and make sure some of the original research you do involves interviews with people in companies that you're interested possibly in working in someday.
Hi, I'm one of the international affairs students that's in the minority here, and I'm interested in development. And my question is for Ms. Ismail and Mr. Jefferson, if you guys could give me some insight on this. I'm wondering, from your perspective, if your company has had any demand from aid or development organizations for your services, and from your perspective, with USAID, did you get any training when you were heading to Eastern Europe or wherever you were? And also in your own company, do you guys provide sort of a crash course, such as the things that you provide to your employees?
Please go ahead.
I can say at Futures we do provide career development and career development training, and so that occurs during the performance review process. So what we try to do is we look at, sit down with the employees and look at what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, but really ask, what do you want to do? Do you want to go live overseas? Do you want the expat lifestyle? And and then we try to match the program to what you the training program and to what you want to do. When I was working with USAID, it was sink or swim. It was they give you a ticket. You're on the other side. You're at the USAID mission, and you're really there working and sort of the first time you're figuring out how things really work in the field. But I would say through internships, there's a lot of people, you have skills that you easily transfer. So if you're working on IT, if you're working on databases, if you're working on a paper, there's a number of volunteer organizations that allow you, when you're traveling, they'll pair you up to be able to transfer that knowledge and train others. I'm part of another nonprofit group that actually does that, but we do it with the African American community here in the U.S. But there are that I would try to find ways to sort of get those opportunities. But we do provide that cultural background training to new staff.
So for me, some of the ways in which I've worked with some of the development organizations, like for example, Peace Corps, and I know USAID a while back, where I've given them, because a lot of my work is in training, development, and delivery, but I've consulted in writing for them to integrate into their training on cultural competency and cultural understanding, and specifically on understanding interfacing with Muslim communities. And again, I always say, 1.2 billion people, you can't reduce to, I can't be the spokesperson. But again, giving some general cultural patterns for understanding. So yes, I mean, there's a tremendous need, but it's one that I've been more in the capacity of consulting. And I guess I can announce I am looking for a student to help in some capacity with developing my business, but also just looking at someone who may have the business and the cross-cultural, not looking for as much experience as someone who's got the willingness and wanting to work. And I just wanted to throw out that I sent you actually an announcement just today because I just thought about it. But again, while you're in school, volunteering, being out there, and please go to my website, Connecting Cultures. You can Google. I'll be happy to hear from you all because there's so many. And through Sherry's book is a tremendous resource. Just in the back of the book is listed a wealth of organizations and institutions. So well worth your investment.
My question is for Ms. Ismail. Throughout your years of knowledge and experience, what do you consider the number one mistake corporations consistently do when it comes to cross-culture?
Well, Americans, typically U.S. Americans, want the quick, can you tell me everything I need to know about these people in 1 hour, right? And it's just painful. And that, again, the complexity of culture, the complexity of people, it's the biggest stumbling block. I'll be honest, some of the people I've gotten business from is because they've lost the millions of dollar contract that they thought they were the best in the industry, the best technology, but they later found out they lost it to the Danish or the British or someone else because an offense that was made. Again, I think that's the biggest mistake that I see in terms of the reduction of trying to make this a quick, 1 hour, and we'll then have everything we need to know to do business globally. That's it.
If I may add to that, just an interesting thought from my other part of life where I dance, that this is a critical mistake that you see over and over again. But at the same time, if you're doing business in the U.S. or if you're a foreigner, a foreign company, trying to understand the U.S. market, just the same way that we're trying to understand foreign markets, This is a huge market opportunity. You can sell so much to Americans if you pack it up into a book. In my dance experience, I know that flamenco takes years to perfect, and I see over and over and over again students and teachers coming up with this flamenco completo. It's like 2 days, and you are basically like on stage in Madrid, And it does work, and there's a lot of money in it. So keep that in mind, and this comes with cultural understanding.
Can I just recommend one book that I think is really a lot of fun? It's called 3 Cups of Tea, about the fellow who was stranded on a mountain in, I think it was Pakistan, and he was saved after he got injured mountain climbing by a village, realized the village didn't have a school, and decided to build a school. If he survived all this, he did. He's now in his 65th school or something. He's from Montana. But he talks a lot about the lessons he learned in this process, and one of them is relationship building and the importance of taking the time to build the relationships before you try to get the business done. And I just wanted to give you that book title as something you might enjoy checking out at the library, and just flip around to where he's talking about the lessons he learned.
Hello. My question is to Mr. Alexei Klikov. I came to the United States 4 years ago, and I think I share many things that you experience here. In fact, actually, I was very fond of the Spanish language since after my first encounter with Hispanic workers in LA. And I came to GW, and I had a lot of Ukrainian friends, and I was very interested in when I was hearing them, I could hear their Russian Ukrainian accent coming out of their English. I was curious about the languages and culture. In fact, I bought a flight ticket to Russia, and I was studying at the Russian university called St. Petersburg State University, and spent the whole summer there, and took a Trans-Siberian Railway all the way back to my home in Korea, but which was kind of an interesting experience. I was wondering, since you're trilingual, Spanish, Russian, and English, and so could you elaborate on your experience on how you utilize your language skills in the business environment?
Sure. So this is really, really important, where you may not directly use the language that you learned, and still it's a worthy investment. So I do not have a single employee that I can speak. Oh, there are several employees that I can speak Spanish or Russian to, but I do not have employees that I have to speak Russian or Spanish to. I did have a couple of situations where the fact that I knew Spanish or Russian was really valuable. I draw out of this that, first of all, I don't know whether this is my last job. And I know the Spanish and Russian and English are on my resume, so that's good. But there is this indirect, enormous indirect value in learning another language or knowing two. And I tried to elaborate on that when I was speaking earlier, so I'm not going to go into a big dive about that. I do not directly use it. I am absolutely and profoundly grateful for the fact that I know those languages.
Okay, I think that was it. Any more questions? Anybody hiding out in the back? Melissa, did you want to? There's one small last question.
Okay, what percentage do you think goes into investment in a company for cultural training aspect? Like, how much does a company typically invest, or how much should they ideally invest in order to make their country?
I can just share with you from my company's perspective. I've been with the company for over 24 years now, and I have seen the change where the company really appreciates its people and is really investing. We have a huge percentage of our budget put into what we call our Sodexo University, and that ranges from technical skills to management, leadership, and cultural skills. And this has been, given our economic condition today, we don't see any change happening in that environment. That as a matter of fact, we're adding more courses, more opportunities, more training programs to our current library, just because we value the potential that training these programs bring to our company. So it is a big investment, but we see the huge benefit, and it's an investment. So it is. I couldn't tell you a percentage, but all I can say is there is a big department. There are resources that are totally dedicated, and this has really evolved in the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years. And it's all, it's ranges. It's incredible. When I look at it, given I have this long history, I see the immense value. And as a matter of fact, I share that with my team and say, there's so much available. Why aren't we using it? And it ranges from classroom to web-based to, there is a lot of online courses that are done, e-learning, which are modules. You do it at your own convenience. So there are books, there are classroom situations, and web-based.
I just want to close with, think about this. This country just elected a man whose name is Barack Hussein Obama. His background is in intersections of faith, an intersection of culture, and that he is now the president-elect of the United States. If anyone thinks that that was used as a deficit, when today, when we see not only here in the United States the celebrations, but someone just sent me the recordings of celebrations in Indonesia. The largest Muslim country. What that says in terms of representing cultures, and even though I don't know, does he speak any other language than English? We need to work on that. But I think that that's changing the story, that as we've heard about him, and the hope is this transformational, and I think that's what American corporations and businesses, government agencies, nonprofit and for-profit are recognizing. It's transformative, our world today, and the economy and what's happening is letting us recognize that the world is everywhere impacted, that there is no such thing as we're being on an island, that we are connected in the best of times, but also in the worst of times. So you are the future, and your capabilities and capacity to master across cultures, across space, across diversity is, inshallah, say God willing, will lead us to a better future.
Okay, I would like to extend a warm thank you to our panelists. It's been a wonderfully thought-provoking and interesting discussion, I think. And also thank you for your insightful questions. We do have some time to discuss with the panelists privately, I think, around the reception. And there's a book signing outside with Jerry Miller's new book. And again, thank you very much to everybody for participating.